My Fridays have a cadence. I'm up early enough to finalize the week's article before my wife needs help getting the older two out the door. Coffee gets made. The youngest is snuggled until it's time for us to leave. The executive membership opens an hour early at Costco, and we are the people who open it up. On our way out, we grab 2 cookies to split among the family and a smoothie for me. We get back in time for lunch and then nap time, which I usually take, the bus, dinner, family movie night. That's the whole day. The family runs well on that speed and that cadence. Everyone takes a breath. They know what to expect and they rest in it. If I hadn't walked through the layers of my soul, I would miss it. Over optimizing the morning, or running from the nap, or anxious about being found at the end of the bus route. Instead, I know what the speed of love is. It's a Costco-Movie Night Friday. That's the whole piece in one Friday. Hi, my name is Jacob Pannell, and this is Faithful Fatherhood. If you've been with me through this series, you know we've spent 7 weeks inside St. Teresa of Avila's interior castle, a 16th century map of the soul's 7 mansions, applied to the interior life of a father. From the parking lot where the reptilian brainstem ran the operation, through the passing notes under the door, through the stall of mastery, the surrender of the pump, the death of the silkworm, and last week's furnace of being found. This is where it ends. And if you read carefully, where it starts. There is a phrase I keep returning to for describing this mansion, and it deserves a definition before we go further. It's called the speed of love. The speed of love is not a velocity. It's a cadence, the pace at which a father can actually be present to his family. Faster than that, the family becomes a sequence of problems to manage. The wife is a logistical partner. The kids are a task. The hours are units to optimize. And the world around you goes quiet, isolated. Not because nothing has happened, but because you have stopped being able to hear it. Slower than the speed of love, well, there's no such thing. The speed of love is the floor. It's the pace at which the world becomes audible, at which your son's question registers as a question and not an interruption, at which the snow falling outside actually falls inside you too, at which the chalice in your hand becomes something you can drink. A German sociologist named Hartmut Rosa has a word for the relationship that becomes possible at this speed. He calls it resonance. The kind of encounter in which you are genuinely touched by the world. You answer with your whole self, and neither party leaves the encounter unchanged. Rosa's argument is that modernity is the great destroyer of resonance, because modernity demands that everything be controllable, predictable, and optimized. And the more we try to master the world, he says, the more mute it becomes. The 7th mansion is where the world isn't mute. The speed of love is what that sounds like. Here's what St. Teresa says happens in the 7th mansion. And it's not what you'd expect. The visions stop. The raptures stop. The dart of love that wounded you last week doesn't arrive anymore. The fire in the chest, the suspension in midair, the trials, they pass. This is not because you graduated. It's because you are now where they lived. When the soul arrives at this state, it does not go into ecstasies, except perhaps on rare occasions. The little butterfly has died with the greatest joy at having found rest at last. And now Christ lives in her. The last clause is the whole game. Christ lives in her. Not visits, not appears, not floods the locket, lives. The way a river runs through its bed without thinking about it. Now, if you told me sometime around Mansion 5 that the goal was for the dramatic moments to stop, I would have argued with you. I wanted the dart. I wanted the locket pressed against my chest. I wanted the proof that something was happening to me. Mansion 6's ache after a good day was painful, but at least it was something. The thing I couldn't have predicted is that what comes after is so quiet, you might miss it. And here's how you'd miss it. You keep looking for the spike. You assume the absence of the dart means the absence of God, and you start optimizing again. Better routines, better books, better frameworks, trying to manufacture the conditions that produce the wound. You want the Mansion 6 experience back because you didn't recognize what Mansion 7 is. So there's a character that we've actually been working with this whole time, and I want you to meet him and name him. And I've been with him for years. He's appeared across this series in different costumes. The spiritual portfolio man in Mansion 3, the buffered dad of Mansion 4, the optimized dad in passing last week. He deserves his own name because he is the one thing standing between most fathers and the seventh mansion. I'm calling him the optimized dad. The optimized dad manages the castle. He has the schedule, the morning routine, the date night rotation, the Sunday liturgy, the family meeting framework, and the screen time rules. He's read the books, done the work. He genuinely loves his kids. He is doing it so much better than most, yet he knows there's something more. So he keeps hunting the spike. He cannot enter the seventh mansion because the seventh mansion is not a place you manage. It's a place you live. The peaceful father lives in Mansion 7. That is the only difference. He may have the same schedule, he may have the same routine, but the routine is no longer the point. He's no longer trying to optimize his way towards something. He is in it. The butterfly has died. That doesn't mean you stopped flying. It means you stopped flapping, gliding along. You arrived at the right speed at last, the speed of love. St. Teresa offers 3 images of what the union or marriage of the seventh mansion looks like. 2 of them she rejects. The first, 2 candles whose flame touch so closely that there's only one light. But you can separate them again, and you'd still have 2 candles. The second, 2 windows letting light into a single room, divided when it enters, unified when it lands. But it's still 2 windows. She rejects both because they describe Mansion 5 and 6. The unions of those mansions were real, but they were events. Something happened, and then it passed. The candles could be drawn apart. The windows could be shuttered. Her image for the seventh mansion is different. She says spiritual marriage is like rain falling from heaven into a river or stream, becoming one and the same liquid. So the river and rainwater cannot be divided. The rain isn't visiting the river. It has become the river. There's no way to extract the rain from the water flowing toward the sea. The union is no longer an event. It's a structure. The river has been raining into itself for so long that the rain and the river are the same water. That's not as rapture, as weather, as rain that has already become river. Now, let me give you some grounding in my own life, because I think this is a really tough concept to kind of grapple on to. So let's go back to Christmas of 2020, that accursed year. We usually do 3 Christmases on Christmas Day. Our house, my parents, and my wife's parents. We're fortunate enough to have all the grandparents and cousins in town, and close enough to pull it off. It's a lot, but in 2020, both sets of grandparents were sick, and we stayed home for COVID lockdown, and we got a rare snow. So we did one Christmas very slowly. And it took everything in me to slow down enough to enjoy the 2 preschoolers I had. We opened a present and played with it. We went out into the snow, ate lunch slowly, took naps, opened another present, snow again, dinner, another present, snow again, bedtime. It felt like an eternity in a day. It was also one of the best days of my life. Somewhere around nap time, I stopped trying to sprint through Christmas. I snuggled my children. I held my wife. I watched it snow. We were warm and we were a family and we were alive in a year when alive was the whole headline. That was the first time I felt what I would later learn to call the speed of love. But here's what's honest. I haven't been able to hold on to that. Most years, I'm still sprinting through Christmas, more at the behest of my children's desire to visit grandparents than my own resistance. But Christmas 2020 was the rain falling. And whenever I think about finding the speed of love again, that is the day I think of. It was a single moment of rain, but a Costco-Movie Night Friday is what happens when the rain has become the river. Many fathers spend their whole lives chasing snow days or Christmases, manufacturing them, optimizing towards them, treating fatherhood as a series of disconnected peak experiences punctuated by long stretches of management. The 7th mansion is where the peaks stop being the point. When the cadence becomes the work, when the rain has been raining into itself for so long that you can no longer separate the gift from the day. That is the speed of love. Be warned though, Mansion 7 isn't a magical cure to optimize toward. It is not the absence of trouble. Let me give you an example. You know those weeks in winter? I call them sick weeks. Everyone passes around the stomach bug that's been hitting the schools that year. And the kids, they never throw up at 3 p.m. on a weekend. It's always 2 a.m., the night before a big presentation. And now you're wondering whether you're going to get sick during your presentation while you're stripping the sheets and stuffing them into the laundry. Those days are special, though. You just move into family mode. You wash the sheets immediately, you lay out sleeping mats in the bathroom, and you get grocery bags into the trash cans before anyone else needs them. Those are some pro tips, by the way. What makes the sick week special is that you're all in it together. Yes, it's stressful, but you don't have to fight it because there is no fighting in illness. You just slow down and accept it and love your family and yourself the best you can through it. This fits St. Teresa's description of the king on his throne, not because the kingdom is peaceful, but because the king is. So, for St. Teresa, a king resides in his palace. Many wars and disasters take place in his kingdom, but he remains on his throne. In the same way, through tumults and wild beasts, rage with great uproar in the other mansions. Yet nothing of this enters the 7th mansion, nor drives the soul from it. Though the whole body is in pain, yet the head, if it be sound, does not suffer with it. So the outer mansions still have weather. The kingdom still has wars. The body still has pain. Throw up pain even. What changes in the 7th mansion is that the center is no longer at the mercy of the surface. St. Teresa continues this image with a twist on a gospel classic that I cannot stop thinking about. She describes a singular woman in Mansion 7 who one day complained of her soul, as Martha did of Mary, frustrated that her soul was enjoying the solitary peace at the very center of her castle, while she was on the surface full of trouble. So that's Mary and Martha are inside a single person. The surface is complaining about the center. The center, unmoved, enjoys its rest and the teaching of Christ. If you have not yet been the parent in this situation, you will be. The dinner is chaos. The kid is dysregulated. The workday was a disaster. The relationship needs a conversation that you don't have time for. And somewhere in you, the center is steady, not detached, not numb, steady. And the Martha in you wants to interrupt the Mary and say, how dare you be peaceful right now? Mansion 7 is when you let Mary keep sitting. This is not discipline. This is not a technique. This is a structural consequence of the 7 mansions of work. The center has become so reliably the center that the surface chaos is no longer a threat. You are free from the fears, even the ones that maybe help drive you through the first 6 mansions. And here's the gift that St. Teresa gives me, because I needed it to tell me what it's like on the other side of that fear. She says, God writes to the soul in this room, not in visions, not in audible voices. From the innermost mansion, God sends what she calls messages. She calls them love letters, so tenderly written and in a cipher that only you can understand and know what he asks. The peaceful father is not running on discipline. He is reading the mail. That's the difference between him and the optimized dad. The optimized dad is responding to the chaos around him with strategies. The peaceful father is responding to a message coming from inside him, from the same place the rain became the river, from the same place the king sits on his throne. It's the same address. And the king does not move at the speed of crisis. He exists at the speed of love. That's the only reason the throne holds on. But I want to be honest with you about something, because this series hasn't lied to you about the cost of what's going on here. When a father becomes a peaceful father, when he stops being reactive, when the chaos no longer drives him, when he is sitting on the throne, the family does not throw a parade. Usually, at first at least, the family escalates. Let me give you an example. When we were in COVID lockdown, we started doing church at home. I want to be honest about why. I was afraid I wasn't doing my part to pass on the faith to my kids, the breadcrumbs they would need to find their way later. We weren't attending Sunday service, and I felt the absence of my own responsibility. So we did church at home, and it went great for 2 weeks. Then the kids crashed out. The next 3 Sundays were meltdowns and refusals, and the kind of fight that lasts through the morning. I yelled at them because I wanted them to follow the breadcrumbs, and they weren't. And I was afraid. There's a name in management vocabulary for this kind of shape, a J curve. Introduce a chain, get an initial high, crash below the baseline, and then, if you stick with it, recover higher than where you started. That is the shape on paper. The shape in the living room is different. The shape in the living room is a question the kids are asking with their bodies. Will you stay on the throne if we light the kingdom on fire? J-curve promises a return on investment if you manage the timeline correctly. The kingdom test promises nothing. It just asks whether you mean it. I wasn't running a new Sunday format. I was taking up a kind of authority I had been outsourcing. And the kids ran an unconscious test on whether I would actually hold it up. When I yelled, the old dad showed up. They saw him, and that was the probe. We stuck with it, though. They adjusted, and the fruit came. But the fruit came is the optimized dad's way of telling the story. What actually happened is that they slowly heard me answer, not because I had defeated their resistance, but because I had stayed at the right speed while they tested whether I could. This is where Hartmut Rosa's resonance matters. The family escalates not because they want chaos, but because they are calling out across the line between us. And they need to know whether their father will answer at the speed of love or whether he will reach for a graph instead. There's no shame for that move. I've reached for plenty of graphs out of the library in my head. But remember, optimization renders the world mute. Resonance requires that the world be allowed to remain uncontrolled and answered anyway. The family is not a J curve to be managed. The family is a voice to be answered. The transition to the throne takes time because old patterns surface to see if they still work. You will feel it as a setback. You will think, I have done all this work and they are worse than before. That is the test. That is precisely the moment the king's throne matters. Because the king does not abandon the throne to deal with the wars in the outer kingdom. He governs from the center. He stays. The peace holds. The peace he holds is not the peace of getting his way. It is the peace of being who he is, regardless of what the kingdom is doing today. It is the peace of finding the speed of love. St. Teresa says it almost casually, but it changed how I read this mansion. She says, the soul wages a fiercer war from thence to keep powers, senses, and the whole body from being idle than it ever did when it suffered in their company. The fiercer war is now possible because the center is no longer fighting itself. The fiercer war is now possible because the center is no longer fighting itself. All the energy that used to go into self-management can now go into actually showing up. You will not be a better dad in Mansion 7 because you finally figured it out. You'll be a better dad because you've stopped being at war with yourself, which means the war you fight for your family is the only one that matters now. Here's what that looks like. In Mansion 6, we use the image of the locket, the precious stone whose effects you knew without ever seeing the stone. You possess something you could not open. In the 7th mansion, the clasp opens. You can see the stone now, and here is what you find, because St. Teresa is too honest to hide it from you. The stone is not your perfection. The stone is your weakness made permanent and findable. And it is not alone in the chamber. Christ has been living there since the butterfly died. The two share the room now. What your family has access to is not the optimized version of you. It is the unguarded one, and the one who has made his home in it. There's a phrase for that the 7th mansion deserves. Findable weakness. Not as a moral failure, not as a vulnerability you confess in a small group, as a permanent condition. Your limits are no longer hidden. Your interior weather is no longer a secret. The mire at the bottom of the river that you first saw clearly in Mansion 6 is now visible to the people you love most, and they can survive it. More than that, they can love you through it. It still takes me time to sink that last sentence in because at my core, I don't trust them enough. The question I use to guide me here, how can I ever learn to trust? And how can they grow in that trust if I don't willingly take the first step? In Mansion 5, I named the grief of inequality, the butterfly's restlessness at recognizing the distance between its own lowliness and the love that had reached it. The grief was real, and it was the engine of Mansion 6. In Mansion 7, the grief does not close. The distance is still there. What changes is that the butterfly stops measuring. It no longer treats its own inadequacy as the variable that determines whether love is happening. The rain has become the river. The river doesn't measure itself. It just flows. For a father, this is the end of an old, exhausting math. You stop calculating whether you were good enough today. You stop weighing your interactions for evidence that you've earned the love of your wife and children. You stop trying to prove that you deserve to be in the room. You are simply in it. At the speed of love, you are findable. Not because you have worked up the courage to be seen, but because the running has stopped and your family can finally hear where you are. I opened this series with a moment. I yelled at my toddler in a Culver's parking lot loud enough for everyone in the Sunday lunch rush to hear. Stop talking! That was the door this series walked through. I told you about it in Mansion 1, and I told you what was happening underneath. The reptilian brainstem had taken over. My world had collapsed to a single point of urgency. Every other truth, that my kid was 3, that the chaos was temporary, that I loved these people, had disappeared. Not because not because those truths stopped being true, but because the brainstem doesn't do nuance. What I didn't know at the time, sitting in that quiet car ride home, is that I was telling you the structure of the whole journey. Mansion 1 was a man whose world could be collapsed by a parking lot. The 7th mansion is the king on his throne. Same man, same brain, same family. Different room, different speed. The wars in the Outer Kingdom are still happening. There will still be a parking lot somewhere, maybe next week. A moment of overstimulation, a fight with my wife, a kid I can't reach, a deadline that won't yield. The difference between Mansion 1 and Mansion 7 is not that the chaos went away. It is that the chaos no longer collapses me to a single point. The reptilian brainstem still fires. It always will, but it doesn't run the operation anymore. There is a throne, there is a king, and the king does not get up to fight every fire in the kingdom. Because if he did, there would be no kingdom. This is the 7-mansion arc in one sentence. From the speed of panic to the speed of love. Now, last week, I left you with a question Jesus asked James and John when they wanted seats of honor in the kingdom. Can you drink the chalice that I shall drink? They said yes, without knowing what it would cost. He told them gently that they would. He gave them the strength to mean it later. You said yes too. Maybe years ago when you became a father. Maybe a few weeks ago when you started this series and didn't put it down. Maybe in Mansion 4 when you laid down the pump. The yes is already on record. What's left is the drinking. But this is the 7th mansion, and this is the sending. St. Teresa is explicit about this part. The whole purpose of the spiritual marriage, she says, the whole purpose of the 7 mansions of contemplative work, which is a deep internal struggle sometimes, is what she calls good works. That's the goal, good works. Mary and Martha must serve our Lord together. Mary at the feet of Jesus is preparing Martha for the kitchen. The contemplative is for the active. The interior castle is for the exterior world. You did not climb through 7 mansions to escape your family. You climbed through them to be in it. I am writing this for the man who started this series, suspecting that fatherhood was costing him something he was supposed to be doing. I am writing this for the man who picked up St. Teresa thinking he was looking for the interior life, only to slowly realize he was already in it. I am writing this for the man whose algorithm picked the lock years ago and has walked far enough into his own castle that the algorithm can no longer reach him. I am writing this for the man who has not yet started, who is reading this paragraph, wondering if the whole thing is for him. It is. The 7th mansion is the room you are already in. You were always going to end up here if you kept going. The work was learning to recognize where you'd been this whole time. This is where you live. The chalice Jesus offered James and John is not somewhere else. It is in the kitchen while your wife is putting kids to bed and you are loading the dishwasher and you are tired. It is in the bath you are running. It is in your hand when you reach across the bed to find your wife's hand at 11 p.m. and neither of you says anything. It is in the conversation with the 11-year-old who has not yet found his words. It is in the apology that you owe one of them tomorrow morning. It is in a Costco-Movie Night Friday. You drink it slowly, a sip at a time, for 30 years, for 60. Drinking it for a lifetime requires a speed you cannot generate on your own. It requires the speed of love. And the speed of love requires a strength that does not come from your optimization. Saint Teresa learned this near the end of her life when she was asked to take up the pen again and she felt unequal to it. She was sick and tired, and she told Christ she did not have the strength. He spoke a single line to her: "Daughter, obedience gives strength." The vocation of fatherhood is not something you perform well enough to stay in. It is not something you optimize your way into. It is not something you graduate from. It is something you obey your way into. One Tuesday or maybe Friday at a time. And the strength you find is not yours. It is given. The 7 mansions were not steps. They were the long undoing of the idea that the steps were what mattered. What mattered the whole time was the room and the speed at which you walk through it. You are in the room. This was never going to end somewhere else. Drink the chalice. To quote Saint Teresa and Christ's response to her: "Daughter, obedience gives." My name is Jacob Pannell, and this is Faithful Fatherhood. Hey, one quick note before we completely close the book on the Mansion series we're doing. I wanted to bring Alfred North Whitehead into this series from the start. I never quite found the right way to do it. Maybe it was my skill or something like that. I'm not sure. But his concept of continuous identity, that each moment so faithfully inherits the last, that what looks like a sequence of events is one unbroken reality, is what's actually under the rain into the river image for Mansion 7. And Whitehead has been in all of this. St. Teresa's spiritual marriage in Whiteheadian terms is a continuous identity rather than a series of episodes. His other concept I kept reaching for is concrescence, the becoming one of many feelings into a single occasion. And that was kind of behind how I thought about a Costco-Movie Friday. Many tiny movements of attention compressing into one shared day at the speed of love. He's been in the background of all 7 weeks. So I hope maybe you've noticed that, but it felt worth calling out since this is the last one to maybe expose some of my thinking or how I arrived at a lot of thought. It wasn't just St. Teresa, but Alfred North Whitehead has been in almost all of my thoughts on this whole project. Process and reality is the big text that he writes, but it will fight you. I personally prefer Religion in the Making, but there's a newer entry due out later this year if you're interested in learning more. It's called Whitehead's Universe. So I want to say that again. The new entry due out later this year is called Whitehead's Universe, and it's by Andrew M. Davis. That one has a glossary of terms, which are always super helpful when working with a different or new to you philosopher, particularly when you have big words like concrescent or words that you know what they mean, but maybe not in this context, like continuous identity. Until next time, I'm Jacob Pannell, and this is Faithful Fatherhood.